Zheng Yi Sao, the woman who ruled the seas. Zheng Yi Sao is not just the most powerful female pirate in history. She is, by every serious historical measure, the most powerful pirate who ever lived, male or female. Long before modern crime syndicates, before cartels, before multinational empires ruled trade routes, one woman controlled the South China Sea with an authority so absolute that even imperial governments surrendered rather than fight her. Her name was feared by merchants, warlords, governors, admirals, and emperors. Her commands were law. Her punishments were final. And her rise began in a place no legend is supposed to begin. She was born around 1775 in Guangdong Province, China, during a time when women had almost no legal power, no military authority, and no social freedom. Her birth name has been lost to history, which itself is symbolic, because the world did not expect her to matter. As a young woman, she worked in a Cantonese floating brothel. This detail is often mentioned casually, but it is critical to understanding her later power. In that environment, she learned something far more valuable than physical survival. She learned human weakness. She listened to merchants talk when they believed no one important was listening. She learned how money moved, how alliances were formed, how men overestimated themselves, and how secrets were traded like currency. She understood power long before she ever held it. In 1801, her life changed forever. Zheng Yi, one of the most feared pirate captains in the South China Sea, married her. This was not a romantic fairy tale. It was a strategic alliance. Zheng Yi commanded a powerful pirate fleet, but what he lacked was organization, diplomacy, and long-term vision. She had all three. From the very beginning of their marriage, Zheng Yi Sao was not a silent partner. She negotiated alliances, helped manage territory, and advised on strategy. Crew members noticed quickly that decisions improved when she was involved. Then, in 1807, Zheng Yi died suddenly during a typhoon. Normally, this would have ended everything. Pirate fleets were brutal, male-dominated, and violently unstable. Leadership was seized through bloodshed. A woman inheriting command was unthinkable. Yet what happened next shocked history. Zheng Yi Sao did not ask for power. She claimed it. Within weeks of her husband's death, she secured control over his entire pirate confederation, over 400 ships and more than 60,000 pirates. This was not luck. She immediately moved to eliminate rivals not through open violence, but through alliances, marriages, and iron rules. She aligned herself with Chung Po-tsai, Zheng Yi's adopted son and most capable commander. Instead of competing with him, she made him her partner, both politically and eventually romantically. Together, they built something unprecedented. Not a pirate gang, not a fleet, but a pirate empire. She organized the pirates into 6 major fleets, each identified by a colored flag: red, black, white, blue, yellow, and green. The Red Flag Fleet, under her direct control, was the most powerful. Every fleet had clear command hierarchy, defined territories, revenue systems, supply chains, laws and punishments. Piracy under Zheng Yi Sao was no longer chaos. It was government. She introduced a strict legal code that all pirates had to follow. Loot was registered and distributed systematically. Anyone who stole from the communal treasury was executed. Anyone who disobeyed orders faced brutal punishment. Most shocking of all were her rules regarding civilians. Rape was strictly forbidden. Any pirate who raped a captive woman was executed immediately. Even consensual relationships with captives were regulated. Unauthorized sexual activity was punishable by death or mutilation. This was not morality. This was control. By enforcing discipline where other pirates allowed chaos, she gained the loyalty of coastal villages. Fishermen warned her fleets of approaching naval forces. Villages paid protection taxes willingly, knowing they would be safer under her rule than under imperial neglect. Soon, entire regions of the South China coast effectively belonged to her. The Qing dynasty tried to stop her. They failed. Chinese naval forces were outdated, corrupt, and poorly motivated. Her fleets were fast, coordinated, and ruthless. Imperial ships were destroyed. Admirals were humiliated. Trade routes collapsed. Then Portugal tried. They failed. Then the British Empire, at the height of its naval power, intervened. Even they struggled. British reports described her forces as unlike any pirate fleet previously encountered. They were not random attackers. They moved with intelligence, strategy, and coordination. At her peak, Zheng Yi Sao controlled more ships than most national navies of the time. And yet, her greatest achievement was still to come. Unlike every other pirate legend, she did not die in battle. She did not disappear. She did not get executed. She retired. In 1810, after years of crushing victories, the Qing government made a decision born of desperation. They offered her full amnesty. She accepted, on her terms. She kept her wealth. Her followers were pardoned. Her commanders retained positions. She walked away untouched. She later ran a successful gambling house and lived into old age, dying peacefully in 1844. No pirate in history, Blackbeard, Henry Morgan, or any other, achieved this. They fought the world. She forced the world to negotiate. How Zheng Yi Sao controlled power, fear, and loyalty. To understand how Zheng Yi Sao ruled more than 60,000 pirates, you must first understand something essential about power. Power is not violence. Power is predictability. Most pirate leaders ruled through fear alone. Their men never knew when punishment would come or who would be next. This created chaos, betrayal, and short-lived authority. Zheng Yi Sao did the opposite. Her rule was brutal, but it was consistent. Every pirate knew exactly what would happen if a rule was broken. There was no negotiation, no favoritism, and no emotional decision-making. This clarity turned fear into discipline, and discipline into loyalty. She understood that pirates did not need kindness. They needed order. Her legal code was one of the most advanced criminal systems of its time, rivaling even imperial military law. Loot was recorded in full. 20% went to a communal fund used for repairs, weapons, and compensation for injured pirates or families of the dead. The rest was distributed based on rank. This eliminated internal conflict over spoils, one of the main reasons pirate crews historically collapsed. Stealing from the common fund was punishable by death. Disobeying orders in battle resulted in execution. Desertion meant beheading. But the most shocking rule, one that cemented her authority, was her treatment of women. Captured women were registered and protected. Any pirate who raped a captive was executed immediately. Any pirate who forced himself on a woman, even a willing one, without permission was punished severely. This rule served multiple purposes. It prevented internal conflict. It prevented revenge attacks from coastal communities. It sent a message that her authority extended into the most private actions of her men. In a world where male violence was expected and ignored, this absolute control over behavior was revolutionary. The result was loyalty from an unexpected source. Coastal villages trusted her. Fishermen warned her fleets when imperial ships were approaching. Villages paid tribute willingly, knowing her pirates would protect them from rival gangs and corrupt officials. In some regions, her rule was considered more just than the Qing government itself. She did not just dominate the sea. She replaced the state. Her fleets enforced taxation, protection, and order. Merchants who paid her were guaranteed safe passage. Those who refused lost ships, cargo, and sometimes their lives. This made her economically untouchable. The Qing dynasty tried to defeat her militarily. Their navy was outdated, underfunded, and plagued by corruption. Many officers secretly cooperated with her, selling information or avoiding confrontation entirely. Battles became humiliations. Imperial ships were lured into narrow waters where her smaller, faster vessels surrounded them. Her fleets used coordinated signaling systems to attack from multiple directions. This was not piracy, it was naval warfare. Foreign powers underestimated her. The Portuguese in Macau believed they could crush her with superior firepower. Instead, they found themselves outmaneuvered, harassed, and drained. Their ships were attacked repeatedly, forcing them to retreat. When the British Empire entered the conflict, they brought experience, discipline, and advanced weaponry. But even British officers acknowledged something unsettling. She did not fight like a pirate. She fought like a general. Her fleets avoided unnecessary losses. They withdrew when needed. They targeted supply lines instead of engaging directly. They controlled territory rather than chasing glory. This patience confused European commanders who expected reckless aggression. While the world focused on her battles, her most important work happened quietly. She controlled information. Spies in ports warned her of naval movements. Merchants reported on political changes. Local officials were bribed or threatened into silence. She knew when fleets would sail before they left port. This made resistance feel pointless. Over time, the Qing government faced a horrifying reality. They were losing not just ships, but legitimacy. Entire coastal regions ignored imperial authority. Taxes went to pirates instead of the emperor. Naval officers refused to fight. Trade suffered. The empire could not win. So they did the unthinkable. They negotiated. In 1810, the Qing government offered amnesty. Most pirates in history were offered execution or exile. She was offered pardon. She accepted, but not as a defeated criminal. She negotiated from strength. Her demands were clear. Her followers would be pardoned. They would be allowed to keep their wealth. They would not be forced into military service. Her commanders would retain status. And she would walk free. The Qing government agreed. This moment alone makes her unique in pirate history. Every famous pirate you know was hunted, betrayed, killed, or executed. She retired. She transitioned into legitimate business, running gambling houses and maintaining influence through wealth and connections. She lived peacefully, dying of natural causes decades later. Her legacy was quietly buried by history, not because she failed, but because she succeeded too completely. Empires prefer to remember rebels who lost. Zheng Yi Sao won. Fear, strategy, and the mind of absolute authority. Zheng Yi Sao understood something that very few leaders in history ever truly grasped. People do not follow strength. They follow certainty. Strength fades. Violence escalates. Fear alone burns itself out. But certainty creates obedience that lasts. From the moment she took control of the Red Flag Fleet, she removed uncertainty from her rule. Every pirate, from the newest deckhand to the most seasoned captain, knew three things with absolute clarity. The rules would never change. Punishment would always be enforced. No one was exempt. This eliminated ambition-driven rebellion before it could begin. Most pirate crews destroyed themselves because leadership was always up for challenge. Any sign of weakness invited violence. Zheng Yi Sao ended this cycle by making challenges meaningless. No duel could defeat a system. She was not the strongest fighter. She did not need to be. She rarely appeared on deck during battle, not because she feared death, but because her presence was unnecessary. Her authority existed before the fight began. Orders flowed through a rigid command structure. Captains answered to fleet leaders. Fleet leaders answered to her. No one skipped levels. No one negotiated in the moment. This separation between command and combat made her untouchable. If a captain disobeyed orders, the punishment was not emotional or impulsive. It was administrative. Names were recorded. Evidence was presented. Judgment was carried out. This cold distance made her feared more than any violent outburst could. Fear based on rage feels temporary. Fear based on inevitability feels eternal. Her control over men was also psychological. Pirate culture valued reputation above life itself. Zheng Yi Sao weaponized this by attaching shame to disobedience. Public punishments were not just executions, they were statements. A pirate punished under her law was remembered as a cautionary example. Death ended suffering. Dishner extended it beyond life. She also understood rewards. Loyal captains were allowed autonomy within their territory. Success was recognized publicly. Wealth was distributed fairly. Families of dead pirates were supported from the communal fund. This created generational loyalty. Fighting for her meant security not just for oneself, but for one's family. In an era where governments abandoned their soldiers, this mattered deeply. Her gender, often portrayed as her greatest obstacle, became one of her strongest weapons. She never tried to imitate male leadership. She never postured physically. She never relied on intimidation through presence. She ruled through structure. This removed any opening for ego-driven challenges. A pirate could fight a man. He could not fight a system without destroying himself. Rumors spread quickly among her fleets. Those who challenged her disappeared. Those who obeyed prospered. Over time, rebellions stopped being discussed. Her fleets expanded not because of forced recruitment, but because pirates from rival groups defected willingly. Her reputation made her organization the safest place for criminals to survive. She was not just feared. She was trusted. This trust extended even to enemies. Merchants who paid her knew she would honor her protection. Unlike imperial officials, she did not accept bribes and then betray agreements. Her word was law, even to those she exploited. This reliability made her indispensable to trade itself. Ironically, the economy of the South China Sea became more stable under her piracy than under imperial rule. This terrified the Qing dynasty, not because she robbed them, but because she replaced them. A government exists when people believe its authority is inevitable. Zheng Yi Sao made the emperor feel optional. This is why military defeat was not enough. She had to be absorbed, not destroyed. The amnesty offered to her was not mercy. It was surrender disguised as forgiveness. After her retirement, the Qing government deliberately erased her influence from official records. Her story survived mostly through foreign accounts and fragmented Chinese sources. History tried to forget her. But power leaves patterns. Modern organized crime, cartel structures, even corporate hierarchies unknowingly mirror her system. Clear rules. Predictable punishment. Controlled rewards. Absolute authority without emotional volatility. She pioneered this at sea, with no formal education, no legal recognition, and no inherited power. Only intelligence. Only discipline. Only will. She died not as a legend hunted by enemies, but as a woman who had already won. And that is why she remains unmatched. Myth, erasure, and why history tried to forget her. History does not simply record power. History edits it. What makes Zheng Yi Sao uncomfortable for historians is not that she was a pirate. It is that she shattered every expectation placed on power, gender, legitimacy, and authority, then walked away untouched. Empires are built on stories. Those stories require villains who are defeated and heroes who restore order. Zheng Yi Sao fit neither role. She was a criminal who forced the state to surrender. So history reduced her. Western accounts often framed her as an exotic curiosity, a female pirate queen, stripping her of political intelligence and reducing her legacy to novelty. Chinese imperial records minimized her victories, describing her retirement as mercy rather than negotiation. Both narratives served the same purpose. They made her success appear accidental. But nothing about her rise was accidental. The myth that she ruled only because of her husband's legacy collapses under scrutiny. Zheng Yi died suddenly, without naming a successor. In pirate culture, that moment should have triggered chaos and bloodshed. Instead, consolidation happened with extraordinary speed. This only occurs when authority is already recognized. Another myth claims she ruled through manipulation alone, seducing or threatening male leaders. This is projection, not evidence. There is no historical record of mass rebellion, assassination attempts, or internal collapse under her command. That level of stability cannot be seduced into existence. It must be engineered. Her legal code, often mentioned briefly, is rarely analyzed seriously. Yet it reveals a mind focused on governance, not impulse. She regulated behavior, distribution of wealth, punishment, and loyalty in a way that mirrored statecraft more than banditry. This is why comparing her to other pirates fails. Blackbeard ruled through terror. Henry Morgan relied on political backing. Most pirate captains survived only as long as fear outweighed resentment. Zheng Yi Sao eliminated resentment. By making rules clear and enforcement absolute, she removed the emotional chaos that destroyed other pirate groups. Her leadership resembled that of an emperor more than a raider. She controlled territory, not just ships. She controlled economies, not just loot. She controlled behavior, not just outcomes. This is why even British officers, who had no reason to glorify her, described her fleets with professional respect rather than mockery. She was not romantic. She was effective. The erasure of her legacy also reflects discomfort with female authority. A woman who ruled violently but rationally disrupts traditional narratives. She was neither a victim nor a symbol. She was an operator. That makes her difficult to categorize, and therefore easy to minimize. Yet when measured objectively, her achievements surpass every pirate in recorded history. She commanded more ships than most navies. She enforced laws more consistently than most governments. She retired with wealth, influence, and safety. No other pirate did all three. Her story forces a deeper question. What defines legitimacy? If people obey, if trade functions, if order exists, does the source of authority matter? 4 years, millions of people along the South China coast lived under her rule. They paid taxes to her. They sought her protection. They feared her punishment. That is governance. That is power. And it did not come from a crown. It came from understanding human nature better than anyone else at sea. She did not chase immortality. She achieved something far rarer. She exited history undefeated. Comparison, legacy, and the final measure of power. To understand the true scale of Zheng Yi Sao's power, she must be compared not to pirates, but to rulers. Pirates are remembered for defiance. Rulers are remembered for control. When compared to emperors, generals, and warlords of her era, her achievements become even more unsettling. Most rulers inherit authority. She created it. Most rulers rely on ideology or divine legitimacy. She relied on enforcement and trust. Most rulers collapse when pressure mounts. She negotiated from dominance. At her height, Zheng Yi Sao commanded between 40,000 and 60,000 men, organized across hundreds of ships, operating across vast maritime territory. This placed her military strength on par with regional states. Yet unlike emperors, she had no bureaucracy inherited from centuries of rule. She built governance from nothing, using only necessity as her blueprint. Her structure mirrored what modern analysts would call a hybrid system, part military hierarchy, part economic syndicate, part legal state. Orders flowed downward. Revenue flowed upward. Protection flowed outward. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. Her success highlights an uncomfortable truth about power. Legitimacy does not come from tradition. It comes from effectiveness. The Qing dynasty claimed divine mandate. But its coastal regions fell apart under corruption and neglect. Zheng Yi Sao offered predictability, protection, and consequence. People chose her. This choice is what made her dangerous. Empires can crush enemies. They struggle to crush alternatives. Her fleets were not just attacking the empire, they were replacing its functions. This is why military victory alone could never end her reign. This is also why the amnesty she received was unprecedented. The Qing government was not forgiving a criminal. It was absorbing a rival authority. She understood this better than anyone. Her negotiation terms were not emotional. They were structural. She ensured her followers would survive the transition intact, with wealth and status preserved. This was not retreat. It was transformation. After retiring, she lived quietly but securely. She did not vanish. She simply stopped needing visibility. Influence continued through wealth, relationships, and reputation. True power does not require attention. It requires permanence. When historians debate the greatest pirates, they often focus on symbolism, skulls, flags, dramatic deaths. Zheng Yi Sao offers none of that romance. She offers something far more intimidating. Success. She did not die fighting the world. She made the world compromise. No other pirate forced multiple governments to admit failure. No other pirate controlled territory for so long with such stability. No other pirate enforced laws that reduced internal violence while increasing loyalty. Measured by control, longevity, scale, and outcome, she stands alone. Her story does not inspire rebellion. It explains authority. That is why it still matters. Because her methods, clear rules, absolute enforcement, controlled rewards, strategic restraint, are still used today in organizations that wield enormous power, both legal and illegal. She did not just rule the sea. She revealed how power actually works. And history, uncomfortable with that revelation, tried to forget her. But forgetting does not undo truth. Zheng Yi Sao remains the most powerful pirate in human history, not because she fought harder, but because she understood power better than anyone who ever raised a black flag. The psychology behind her absolute control. To truly understand Zheng Yi Sao, you must move beyond what she did and examine how she thought. Her greatest weapon was not ships, cannons, or manpower. It was psychological precision. She understood that human behavior follows patterns. Fear, greed, loyalty, pride, these forces do not change with culture or time. What changes is how leaders explain them to themselves. Most leaders believe people are loyal because of belief or inspiration. Zheng Yi Sao knew better. People are loyal when the cost of betrayal is higher than the reward, and when obedience creates stability. She engineered both. From the beginning, she removed ambiguity. Ambiguity is where rebellion grows. When rules are unclear, individuals test limits. When enforcement is inconsistent, factions form. Her system allowed no such space. A pirate did not wonder, "Will I be punished?" He knew he would be. This certainty reshaped behavior at a subconscious level. Fear became internalized. Discipline became automatic. Over time, obedience no longer felt forced, it felt normal. This is how institutions survive beyond individuals. She also understood identity. Pirates are outsiders by nature. They are men who rejected law, hierarchy, and restraint, often because those systems failed them. Instead of trying to civilize them, she gave them a new identity. They were not criminals. They were members of an order. Her fleets had symbols, ranks, colors, and reputations. Belonging mattered. A pirate under her command was not just surviving, he was part of something larger, more stable, and more feared than any single man. This transformed chaotic violence into purposeful action. She also mastered emotional distance. She did not reward loyalty with affection. She rewarded it with security. Emotional leaders create dependency. Rational leaders create predictability. Predictability outlasts emotion. She did not need to inspire love. Love creates disappointment. She cultivated respect and fear, both of which age well. Even her relationship with Chung Po Tsai followed this logic. Their alliance was political before it was personal. By aligning herself with the most capable commander, she eliminated a potential rival while strengthening her legitimacy. She turned a threat into reinforcement. This pattern defined her leadership. Potential enemies were absorbed, neutralized, or redirected, not provoked. She never rushed. Impatience is weakness pretending to be courage. Her patience frustrated enemies and reassured followers. When she withdrew from battle, it was not retreat, it was calculation. She preserved strength while draining opponents psychologically. Her enemies never knew when she would strike. Her followers always knew what she expected. This asymmetry created dominance. Another crucial psychological element was her treatment of death. She normalized it. Executions were not dramatic. They were procedural. This removed shock and turned punishment into expectation. Fear became less emotional and more structural. This is why rebellions failed to form. Fear driven by chaos inspires desperate resistance. Fear driven by order inspires compliance. She chose order. Her final psychological achievement was knowing when to stop. Most leaders fall because they cannot detach from power. They confuse survival with conquest. She did not. When the cost of continued rule exceeded its benefits, she exited strategically. She preserved her people, her wealth, and her legacy. This self-restraint is rare. And it is why she lived. She did not seek to become a myth. She sought to remain in control. And she succeeded. Inside the daily machinery of a pirate empire. The true measure of Zheng Yi Sao's power was not seen in battle. It was seen on ordinary days. An empire is not maintained by constant violence. It is maintained by routines that function even when nothing dramatic happens. This is where most pirate fleets failed, and where her system proved extraordinary. Every day within her confederation followed structure. Orders did not begin with her voice. They began with established procedure. Fleet leaders received directives through trusted intermediaries. Captains transmitted those orders to ship officers. Crew leaders enforced them at the lowest level. No pirate acted independently during operations. Independence was the enemy of survival. Each fleet operated within defined maritime zones. This prevented internal competition and accidental conflict. Fishing villages, ports, and trade routes were assigned protection status or taxation status. Nothing was left vague. Tribute collection followed schedules. Coastal communities knew when payments were due and what protection they received in return. Failure to pay did not result in random punishment, it resulted in targeted enforcement. This predictability reduced resistance. Merchants preferred paying pirates who kept agreements over bribing officials who broke them. At sea, discipline was constant. Ships traveled in formations. Signal flags and lantern systems coordinated movement. Retreats were planned in advance. No captain was allowed to pursue personal glory. Unauthorized attacks were punished severely. This removed recklessness. Supplies were managed centrally. Food, weapons, ammunition, and repair materials were pooled and redistributed as needed. Ships in distress were supported. Crews injured in battle were compensated. This eliminated desperation, which often leads to mutiny. Discipline on board ships was relentless. Gambling disputes, theft, and violence between crew members were not tolerated. Internal conflict weakened authority, so it was crushed early. Punishments were public but procedural. No shouting. No spectacle. Just consequence. This routine made obedience automatic. On land, her influence extended through intermediaries. Trusted agents handled negotiations, intelligence gathering, and financial operations. She rarely needed to appear personally. Her authority traveled ahead of her. This created the illusion that she was everywhere. Information flowed constantly. Fishermen, merchants, port workers, and even government employees acted as informants. Not always through loyalty, often through practicality. She paid better. She punished less randomly. She kept promises. This made cooperation logical. Her fleets rotated crews to prevent localized loyalties from forming. Captains were powerful, but never irreplaceable. No individual controlled enough influence to challenge the system. This was intentional. Power concentrated below her level was a threat. She prevented it without confrontation. The daily life of a pirate under her rule was harsh, but stable. Food was reliable. Loot distribution was fair. Punishment was predictable. Survival felt possible. In contrast, imperial service was corrupt, underpaid, and arbitrary. Men chose her not because she was kind, but because she was consistent. This consistency allowed her empire to function without constant oversight. Systems replaced improvisation. Loyalty replaced fear-driven chaos. And that is why her confederation lasted longer than any pirate force before or after. It did not depend on her presence. It depended on her design. Naval strategy and the art of winning without glory. Zheng Yi Sao never believed that victory required destruction. She believed it required control of movement. Most naval commanders of her era sought decisive battles. They believed sinking enemy ships proved dominance. She understood something far more effective. A ship that cannot move is already defeated. Her fleets were designed for speed, coordination, and flexibility. While imperial and European navies relied on larger, heavier vessels, her ships were lighter, faster, and more numerous. This allowed her to dictate when and where engagements occurred. She avoided open water confrontations. Whenever possible, open water favored heavy cannons and formal formations. She preferred coastal waters, river mouths, narrow channels, and island chains, spaces where maneuverability mattered more than raw firepower. Her captains memorized tides, currents, and seasonal winds. Attacks were timed precisely. Enemy ships were lured into unfavorable positions and surrounded. This was not chaos. It was choreography. Signal systems allowed fleets to move as one. Flags during the day. Lanterns at night. Drums and horns when visibility failed. Orders changed instantly across dozens of ships. Imperial navies struggled to respond. Their command chains were slow. Their captains waited for authorization. By the time decisions were made, her fleets had already repositioned. She also understood exhaustion as a weapon. Rather than destroying enemy ships outright, her fleets harassed them repeatedly. Supply lines were attacked. Repair ships were targeted. Crews were denied rest. Morale collapsed before hulls did. This psychological attrition forced retreats without decisive battles. Against the Portuguese, she exploited their dependence on fixed ports. By attacking trade routes instead of forts, she strangled their influence. Their superior cannons meant little when there was nothing left to protect. The British faced a different problem. They were disciplined, experienced, and technologically advanced. But they expected opponents to follow predictable patterns. Zheng Yi Sao refused. Her fleets disengaged suddenly. They refused battle when conditions were unfavorable. They regrouped invisibly. British commanders described fighting an enemy that evaporated. This frustrated them more than defeat. Because there was nothing to conquer. She also understood restraint. Ships captured were often incorporated rather than destroyed. Crews were absorbed, not slaughtered. This expanded her power without draining resources. Every victory made her stronger. Every enemy mistake benefited her. Her fleets rarely chased fleeing enemies. Pursuit created risk. Risk created opportunity for reversal. She preferred containment. Containment breaks will. She also knew when not to fight. Storms, poor visibility, or uncertain intelligence meant delay. Many commanders mistook this for weakness. They paid for that mistake later. Her naval strategy was not about heroism. It was about inevitability. Enemies learned that resisting her did not lead to glorious defeat, it led to slow collapse. This is why governments feared her more than reckless pirates. She did not seek attention. She sought outcomes. And she achieved them with precision. Money, control, and the engine that sustained her power. Violence builds empires quickly. Money keeps them alive. Zheng Yi Sao understood that fear could conquer territory, but only economics could hold it. Her pirate confederation did not survive because it intimidated the South China Sea. It survived because it organized wealth better than the state it replaced. At the core of her system was redistribution. Every successful raid followed a fixed process. All captured goods, silver, silk, weapons, food, and ships, were registered. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was claimed privately before accounting. This alone separated her from most pirate leaders. 20% of all loot went directly into a communal treasury. This fund was sacred. It paid for ship repairs, weapons, medical care, and compensation for injured pirates or the families of the dead. This created security. A pirate under her command knew that death did not mean abandonment of his family. Injury did not mean starvation. This removed the desperation that causes betrayal. The remaining wealth was distributed according to rank and contribution. Captains were rewarded, but not excessively. Crew members received predictable shares. There were no sudden shortages, no favoritism, no mystery. Greed thrives in uncertainty. She eliminated uncertainty. On land, taxation followed similar logic. Coastal villages and merchants paid fixed protection fees. Rates were known in advance. Payments were scheduled. Protection was guaranteed. Failure to pay did not result in random destruction. It resulted in enforcement. Ships were seized. Goods were confiscated. Trade was blocked. This precision made compliance rational. Merchants compared her system to imperial taxation and found hers preferable. Officials demanded bribes repeatedly, changed rules without warning, and offered no real protection. She offered consistency. This consistency stabilized trade routes. Under her control, piracy paradoxically reduced chaos. Independent raiders were eliminated. Smuggling was regulated. Violence decreased. Trade did not stop. It adapted. This adaptation terrified the Qing dynasty. Because when an illegal economy becomes more efficient than the legal one, legitimacy shifts. Her wealth also bought silence. Port officials, naval officers, and administrators were bribed not with desperation, but with reliability. Payments were regular. Agreements were honored. Betrayal was punished once, and remembered forever. This made corruption efficient. Even her enemies benefited from her system. Captured ships were often returned after fines were paid. crews were released after oaths were sworn. This reduced resistance and encouraged negotiation rather than revenge. She turned piracy into a business. And business, when stable, attracts loyalty. Her personal wealth grew immense, but she never displayed excess. Extravagance invites envy. Envy invites challenge. She lived simply, strategically. Money was not her identity. It was her instrument. This economic discipline allowed her to do something no other pirate ever achieved. She made retirement possible. When the Qing government offered amnesty, she did not face ruin. Her followers did not face collapse. Wealth had been preserved, distributed, and protected. She exited with leverage. That is the final proof of her genius. She did not rule by chaos. She ruled by accounting. And accounting, more than cannons or fear, sustained the most powerful pirate empire in history. Retirement, legacy, and the enduring power of Zheng Yi Sao. After decades of ruling the South China Sea with unmatched authority, Zheng Yi Sao did something no other pirate in history ever did. She walked away. Her retirement was not quiet because of weakness. It was quiet because she had already won. She negotiated amnesty on her terms, her wealth intact, her followers pardoned, her commanders retained influence, and her enemies forced to recognize her authority. Most pirates ended their lives in blood or shame. She ended hers in control. She returned to Guangdong and established a legitimate business, a gambling house. Unlike other retired pirates, she did not flaunt her power. Her influence was subtle, woven into the social and economic fabric of the region. Her wealth and networks ensured that she remained untouchable. Even in retirement, she shaped events. Her former captains, now commanders and merchants, carried her policies into local politics. Coastal villages continued to follow her code because they had prospered under it. She had created an enduring system. Attempts to replace her failed because her model could not easily be replicated. Any leader attempting to take her place would need her combination of strategic intelligence, psychological control, economic organization, and patience. Few men, or women, ever possessed all four qualities. Her death in 1844 marked the end of a personal story but not of her influence. Zheng Yi Sao became a legend whispered among sailors, merchants, and officials. Her name carried authority long after she passed. Her legacy is remarkable for several reasons. Scale of authority. No pirate before or since commanded more ships or men. Her influence was larger than many regional states. Organizational genius. She transformed chaotic raiding into a structured system with laws, economy, and hierarchy. Strategic mastery. She used intelligence, terrain, and psychological insight to defeat superior naval forces. Economic innovation. Her taxation, redistribution, and protection systems created stability where governments failed. Enduring control. She retired with power intact, a feat no other pirate achieved. Even today, her methods echo in modern organizational strategies. Corporations, criminal syndicates, and military hierarchies unknowingly replicate her approach. Clear rules, predictable punishment, loyalty rewards, controlled expansion, and strategic restraint. Zheng Yi Sao did not just survive the South China Sea. She ruled it, reshaped its politics, controlled its economy, and left a legacy that still teaches lessons about power, leadership, and human nature. In history, she is more than a pirate. She is a masterclass in authority, a case study in strategy, and a reminder that true power is built not on violence alone, but on order, discipline, and vision. No other pirate, not Blackbeard, Henry Morgan, or Chung Po Tsai, ever reached her combination of scale, intelligence, and influence. She remains, without dispute, the most powerful pirate in history. Daily life, social structure, and hierarchy in her pirate empire. Zheng Yi Sao's empire was more than ships and cannons. It was a society. To maintain control over tens of thousands of pirates, she established a social structure that was rigid yet functional, a system that balanced discipline, loyalty, and personal incentive. Life for a pirate under her rule followed a predictable rhythm. Dawn began with inspections. Crews checked ships, weapons, and supplies. Captains reported directly to fleet leaders. Fleet leaders reported to Zheng Yi Sao's trusted advisors. Obedience was tracked meticulously. Pirates lived in organized quarters on board ships. Living spaces were tight but structured. Each man knew his role, responsibilities, and rank. Chaos was minimized because every task, from navigation to maintenance to combat readiness, was assigned and monitored. Meal times were also regulated. Food was rationed according to rank and contribution. Maintaining health was a priority because injured or weak pirates threatened the efficiency of the fleet. Medicine and treatment were organized from the communal fund, demonstrating that she understood human survival as a strategic asset. Discipline extended to behavior. Fighting, theft, and insubordination were punished swiftly. Yet, Zheng Yi Sao's system was designed to reward competence and loyalty. Promotions were earned based on merit, not favoritism. This made ambitious pirates see opportunity in service rather than rebellion. Socially, Zheng Yi Sao controlled interactions. While the Red Flag Fleet tolerated women in certain roles, all relationships were regulated. Unauthorized sexual activity was punished severely, not as morality, but as control. By regulating desire and distraction, she minimized conflicts that could destabilize her fleet. Hierarchy was essential. At the top was Zheng Yi Sao herself, then her trusted lieutenants, and then captains of individual fleets. Below them were officers who supervised specialized teams for weapons, navigation, supply, and intelligence. At the bottom were ordinary sailors, whose lives were dangerous but predictable. This hierarchy was transparent. Every pirate knew the chain of command, the consequences for disobedience, and the rewards for loyalty. There were no shadow leaders or secret power grabs. Attempts at conspiracies were quickly uncovered, often through her intelligence network that extended to port towns and local informants. Even downtime was structured. Pirates trained daily. Combat drills, navigation exercises, and teamwork routines were mandatory. This constant preparation ensured that when battle came, fleets operated like a well-oiled machine. Chaos, which destroyed most pirate crews, never emerged under her rule. The Red Flag Fleet's social cohesion was also strengthened by rituals and symbols. Flags, colors, and ranks created identity. Pirates were no longer anonymous criminals. They were members of a disciplined order with prestige and shared purpose. In short, her pirate society was a microcosm of governance. Discipline, reward, hierarchy, and regulation created an environment where tens of thousands of men followed a single authority without constant coercion. This is why her empire endured longer than any other pirate fleet. It was not just force that held it together, it was structure, psychology, and trust, meticulously designed by the woman who understood power better than anyone before or since. Lieutenants, commanders, and the backbone of her empire. Zheng Yi Sao's power did not rest solely on her own intelligence or authority. It rested equally on the leaders she chose, trusted, and controlled. Her lieutenants were not just subordinates, they were extensions of her will, each playing a vital role in maintaining the stability of an empire that spanned hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of men. The most notable among them was Chung Po-tsai, her adopted son and later partner. Chung was not merely a figurehead, he was a brilliant tactician and disciplined captain who earned his position through merit. Zheng Yi Sao recognized his talent early and made him her lieutenant, ensuring loyalty by integrating him into both her personal and political network. This strategic partnership neutralized one of the most common risks to pirate empires, betrayal from within. Other fleet leaders were selected for competence, loyalty, and psychological profile. She rarely promoted based on fear or charisma alone. Instead, she evaluated how well a captain could enforce her rules, maintain order among the crew, and execute strategy without deviation. Each lieutenant was trained to manage both men and resources efficiently, understanding that their personal authority existed only because it served the broader system. This hierarchy created multiple layers of accountability. A fleet captain could not act on personal ambition without exposure. Decisions were documented, orders were relayed through multiple channels, and intelligence networks monitored both internal and external threats. Her empire functioned like a living organism. Every officer had a role, and each role reinforced the whole. The lieutenants also served as disciplinarians and enforcers. Piracy attracts individuals accustomed to chaos. Without enforcement, mutiny and theft were inevitable. Her lieutenants implemented the rules with precision. Theft, insubordination, or unauthorized aggression was punished swiftly and publicly, creating a deterrent visible to all. Yet Zheng Yi Sao balanced fear with incentive. Loyal lieutenants received recognition, wealth, and power, but their authority was never absolute. The balance prevented the rise of rival power centers that could challenge her directly. By allowing autonomy within a controlled framework, she increased efficiency while minimizing risk. Her lieutenants also managed intelligence. Coastal villages, port towns, and even corrupt government officials became part of an information network. Reports of incoming imperial forces, merchant shipments, or rival pirate movements were funneled through them. Zheng Yi Sao relied on this structure to make strategic decisions before her enemies even realized a threat existed. The loyalty of her commanders was reinforced by both respect and fear. Unlike other pirate fleets, where brutal enforcement often bred resentment, her system allowed capable leaders to thrive while ensuring no one overstepped. Ambition became a tool, not a threat. In practice, this meant that her empire could operate at massive scale without collapsing. Each lieutenant acted as a mini-governor, managing their fleet's resources, discipline, and operations. Yet all were accountable to the same authority, her. Without this carefully chosen and managed cadre of commanders, Zheng Yi Sao's empire would have been short-lived. Her ability to delegate power while maintaining absolute control over strategy and enforcement was unprecedented. The empire did not survive because of her presence alone. It survived because of the network of capable, loyal, and disciplined lieutenants she built and controlled. Naval battles and tactical mastery. Zheng Yi Sao's reputation as the most powerful pirate in history was not built on myth. It was built on decades of flawless naval strategy. Her success at sea was the result of meticulous planning, understanding of geography, psychological insight, and disciplined execution. Unlike most pirates, she never relied on chaos or luck. Every engagement followed strategic principles designed to maximize her fleet's strengths and exploit her enemies' weaknesses. Her preferred theaters of operation were coastal waters, river mouths, and island channels. Open seas favored larger imperial or European warships with superior firepower. Zheng Yi Sao avoided these at all costs. She chose environments where maneuverability, knowledge of tides, and hidden passages gave her a tactical advantage. Fleet coordination was key. Her Red Flag fleet, the most powerful in her empire, operated under a clear chain of command. Each ship had a designated role: scout, attack, blockade, or reserve. Signal flags during daylight, lanterns at night, and horns or drums when visibility failed ensured that her fleets could move as a single entity even across hundreds of ships. A prime example of her tactical genius occurred against the Qing Navy. Imperial forces attempted to trap her in a narrow estuary, expecting the fleet to be cornered. Zheng Yi Sao, however, anticipated this maneuver. She split her fleet into two divisions, one engaged directly, while the other maneuvered behind the enemy. When the Qing ships attempted to retreat, they found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, and exhausted. Many surrendered without a fight, others were destroyed. Casualties were minimized on her side. Victory was absolute. Her encounters with the Portuguese and British further illustrate her brilliance. Against the Portuguese, she focused on disrupting trade routes rather than attacking fortified ports. Her fast, maneuverable ships could strike, retreat, and reappear elsewhere, forcing the Portuguese to defend multiple points simultaneously. With the British, the stakes were even higher. Experienced commanders with advanced ships underestimated her fleet's intelligence and discipline. They expected chaotic pirate tactics. Zheng Yi Sao delivered precision operations, harassing supply lines, blockading trade, and forcing engagements under conditions favorable to her forces. Her ability to read enemy psychology allowed her to predict moves and manipulate outcomes without committing to unnecessary battles. She rarely pursued fleeing enemies. Pursuit increased risk, spread her forces thin, and exposed them to counterattacks. Instead, containment became her weapon. Blockades, patrols, and strategic positioning exhausted opponents and forced surrender over time. Even captured ships were repurposed. Her engineers and crew could repair, refit, and integrate them into the fleet. This continuous expansion meant her strength grew after every engagement, while opponents weakened. Perhaps her most brilliant innovation was the integration of intelligence with naval strategy. Coastal informants, defectors from enemy fleets, and merchants reporting imperial movements allowed her to act preemptively, striking before opponents were ready. Naval engagements became predictable in her favor because she effectively fought with knowledge while others relied on reaction. Zheng Yi Sao's naval mastery was not reckless. Every move was calculated, every ship's position deliberate. She won battles not because of superior firepower, but because she controlled space, time, and information, three forces far more powerful than cannons. Her victories cemented her dominance. Rival pirates joined her fleet voluntarily, recognizing the inevitability of her power. Governments negotiated instead of fighting. Trade routes stabilized under her control. Her fleet became not just feared, but respected even by her enemies. No other pirate in history coordinated naval operations at this scale with such precision, intelligence, and restraint. Her mastery at sea was the foundation of her empire. Without it, the laws, economy, and hierarchy she built would have collapsed under pressure. Trade, smuggling, and economic mastery. Zheng Yi Sao's empire was not sustained by swords alone. Wealth was its lifeblood, and she understood that controlling the flow of goods was as important as controlling ships. Her economic system was structured, disciplined, and ruthless in efficiency, making her pirate confederation more prosperous than the governments she opposed. At the heart of her empire were trade routes. Unlike most pirates who relied solely on opportunistic raids, Zheng Yi Sao established semi-permanent control over coastal and riverine commerce. Merchants knew her fleets would protect or tax shipments depending on cooperation. This predictability turned piracy into a functioning economic system rather than random chaos. Smuggling operations were integrated into the fleet's daily routines. Ships were assigned specific routes for transporting goods between ports, often under cover of legitimate trade. Precious cargo, silver, silk, spices, and rice, was carefully logged. Nothing was hidden from the accounting system, ensuring that wealth could be redistributed without disputes. Her economic intelligence network was vast. Villagers, fishermen, port officials, and even rival pirates reported movements of trade vessels and imperial fleets. This allowed Zheng Yi Sao to anticipate economic opportunities, strike at the right targets, and secure revenue before her enemies could respond. Distribution of wealth followed strict rules. 20% of captured loot went to the communal treasury, funding ship repairs, medical care, and compensation for injured pirates. The remainder was distributed according to rank and contribution. Regularized pay prevented mutiny, reduced envy, and incentivized efficiency. Loyalty was rewarded, disobedience punished. Economic structure became a tool of psychological control. Her fleets also controlled local economies. Coastal villages often voluntarily paid tribute in exchange for protection from rival pirates and corrupt officials. By regulating taxation and enforcement, she created stability. Merchants and fishermen learned that working within her system offered safety, profit, and continuity. In many ways, she replaced ineffective state governance with a pirate-administered economy. Supply chains were meticulously managed. Food, ammunition, weapons, and repair materials were distributed according to need. Ships running low on resources were prioritized for resupply. This prevented desperation-driven mutiny and ensured operational readiness at all times. Even captured ships became assets. Rather than destroying enemy vessels, her engineers refitted them, integrating them into the fleet. This continuous expansion of capacity allowed her empire to grow after every engagement, making each naval victory economically beneficial as well as strategically decisive. By integrating trade, smuggling, taxation, and redistribution into a single, disciplined system, Zheng Yi Sao created an economic machine that funded her fleet, stabilized her rule, and maintained loyalty. Her empire survived because money created rational incentives stronger than fear alone ever could. Through this network, she achieved something unique. Her pirate empire was financially self-sustaining, strategically flexible, and socially stable, a feat no other pirate before or since accomplished. Psychological warfare and intelligence mastery. Zheng Yi Sao understood that information is more powerful than force. Her empire thrived not only because of ships or wealth but because she controlled knowledge, manipulated perceptions, and anticipated the actions of both friends and enemies. Intelligence gathering was constant. Coastal villages, merchants, fishermen, and even imperial officials became informants. Some were bribed, some coerced, and some acted out of pragmatism. Every report, from enemy fleet movements to trading schedules, was logged, verified, and used to predict outcomes. She knew events before they happened, allowing her to strike with precision while opponents were reacting blindly. She employed misinformation strategically. False attacks, decoy fleets, and rumors about her location or plans were deliberately circulated. Enemy commanders often acted on incorrect intelligence, falling into traps she had prepared days in advance. Her ability to manipulate perception gave her a decisive advantage without committing her forces unnecessarily. Psychological warfare extended to her own crews. Fear was structured and predictable. Loyalty was rewarded with tangible benefits. Pirates understood the consequences of betrayal, yet they also saw consistent, fair distribution of wealth and protection for their families. This duality, fear balanced with rational self-interest, kept mutiny virtually non-existent. She also mastered the psychology of her enemies. Imperial commanders and foreign officers underestimated her because she was a woman, assuming unpredictability or impulsiveness. She used these biases to her advantage, creating overconfidence in opponents that often led them into traps. In negotiations, Zheng Yi Sao projected confidence, patience, and inevitability. She never rushed decisions. This calm, calculated demeanor gave the impression of omniscience, making her adversaries question their options and often choose surrender rather than risk confrontation. Her intelligence system was multi-layered. Human networks. Informants provided real-time information about enemy movements, trade schedules, and potential threats. Observation posts, coastal lookouts and scouts monitored the seas, reporting any unusual activity directly to fleet commanders. Internal surveillance, she monitored her own lieutenants and captains, ensuring no one gained excessive independent power. Psychological manipulation. She used fear, misinformation, and reputation management to control perception among both enemies and allies. This integration of intelligence, psychology, and discipline transformed her pirate fleet into a predictable, coordinated, and formidable force. Battles were rarely chaotic. Operations were carefully planned based on accurate or strategically manipulated information. Her psychological strategies were crucial in turning chaos-prone pirates into an organized, loyal army. They also made her an unpredictable and overwhelming adversary to imperial forces. Opponents often surrendered before battles fully unfolded because they knew her strategy was inevitable and her outcome favorable. In essence, Zheng Yi Sao's intelligence and psychological warfare were as important as her ships, cannons, and wealth. Without them, the Red Flag Fleet could never have achieved dominance over tens of thousands of pirates, hundreds of ships, and the South China Sea itself. Her mastery of mind games, information control, and perception management cemented her legacy, not just as a pirate, but as a strategist unparalleled in history. Cultural impact, historical influence, and enduring lessons. Zheng Yi Sao's story did not end with her retirement or death. Her legacy rippled across cultures, influenced governance, and shaped the perception of power in ways few leaders, pirate or sovereign, ever achieved. Her cultural impact is profound. In China, she became both a cautionary tale and a symbol of intelligence, discipline, and female authority. While official histories often minimized her achievements, folk stories, songs, and local accounts preserved her memory as a pirate queen who commanded respect, loyalty, and fear in equal measure. These stories emphasized her wisdom, strategy, and unshakable control, rather than simply glorifying violence. In the West, her name appeared sporadically in maritime reports, often reduced to a female pirate or exotic raider. Yet even foreign navies recognized her skill. British, Portuguese, and Dutch officers all acknowledged the challenge she posed to naval supremacy, an acknowledgement rare for any pirate, male or female. Her influence on organizational strategy is remarkable. Modern military and corporate systems unknowingly reflect her principles. Clear hierarchy, authority delegated in layers to ensure order and accountability. Predictable enforcement, rules and consequences applied consistently to maintain discipline. Controlled rewards, incentives aligned with loyalty, competence, and obedience. Information dominance, intelligence gathered systematically to anticipate threats and opportunities. Strategic patience, avoidance of rash action, with focus on long-term stability and outcomes. Even criminal organizations in later centuries mirrored her model. The combination of economic regulation, loyalty-based reward systems, and disciplined enforcement became standard for entities that sought longevity rather than short-term gains. Zheng Yi Sao also challenged gender norms. In an era dominated by men at sea and in politics, she demonstrated that authority does not rely on physical dominance. Instead, power is created through structure, intellect, and psychological mastery. This lesson resonates across history, highlighting that effective leadership transcends conventional expectations. Her retirement is equally instructive. By leaving at the peak of her power, she ensured the survival of her followers, preserved her wealth, and maintained her influence quietly. This demonstrates a critical principle of lasting authority, knowing when to act and when to withdraw. Her historical influence extends into modern leadership theory. Zheng Yi Sao embodies lessons that remain relevant today. Power is systemic, not personal. A well-designed system can operate without constant oversight. Loyalty is cultivated through fairness, not fear alone. Rational incentives sustain obedience better than intimidation. Information is the ultimate weapon. Anticipating movements and manipulating perceptions create strategic advantage. Restraint is strength. The ability to withdraw strategically preserves influence and avoids unnecessary risk. In sum, Zheng Yi Sao was more than a pirate. She was a master, strategist, an economic innovator, a psychological tactician, and a ruler without a crown. Her empire was a model of efficiency, discipline, and sustainability that no other pirate achieved. Even centuries later, her story challenges assumptions about power, gender, and leadership. She remains unmatched, not because of violence, but because she understood the nature of control, human behavior, and strategy better than any contemporary or successor. Her legacy is enduring, the most powerful pirate in history, not through chaos, but through vision, intelligence, and unassailable authority. Ships, navigation, maritime innovation, and final reflections. Zheng Yi Sao's mastery extended beyond leadership, economics, and psychology. She also understood the sea itself, its vessels, currents, winds, and geography, better than almost any contemporary commander. Her fleet's success depended on innovation in ship design, navigation, and operational strategy. Her ships were not the largest or most heavily armed, but they were optimized for speed, maneuverability, and coordination. Red flag fleet vessels were sleek, shallow-drafted, and agile, capable of navigating rivers, estuaries, and coastal channels inaccessible to larger warships. This allowed her to strike unpredictably and retreat safely, avoiding costly open sea engagements. She also invested in standardized ship construction. Uniform designs simplified repairs, crew training, and fleet coordination. Captains and crews could transfer between ships seamlessly, maintaining operational efficiency even under duress. Cannons, sails, and rigging were consistent across fleets, enabling synchronized tactics and predictable performance during battles. Navigation was precise. Zheng Yi Sao and her commanders memorized tidal patterns, currents, and seasonal weather. Coastal geography, hidden bays, reefs, and islands became tactical advantages. She used these natural features to trap enemies, stage ambushes, and secure supply routes, demonstrating a profound understanding of maritime strategy. Her innovations went beyond tactics. Communication across hundreds of ships relied on signal flags, lanterns, drums, and horns, forming a pre-modern naval network that allowed real-time coordination. She integrated intelligence gathering into this network. Lookouts reported enemy movements, villages relayed merchant activities, and spies within opposing fleets provided early warning of ambushes. Logistics were equally sophisticated. Supplies, repairs, and reinforcements were centrally coordinated. Captured ships were refitted and redistributed to strengthen the fleet, while strategic reserves of food, weapons, and ammunition ensured operational readiness. This level of organization created an empire that could operate continuously, adapt to change, and withstand prolonged conflict. Even when facing superior forces, Zheng Yi Sao's fleet remained unpredictable. Enemies miscalculated her capabilities because they could not grasp her integrated approach. Psychology, strategy, logistics, and technology combined into a single, disciplined system. Her retirement reflected the same strategic genius. By the time she left the South China Sea, her influence was woven into every coastal community, trade route, and political interaction. Her wealth, networks, and reputation ensured continued security for herself and her followers. She demonstrated the ultimate lesson of power. True mastery lies not only in conquering, but in exiting on one's own terms. Zheng Yi Sao remains a singular figure in history. No pirate rivaled her scale, her intelligence, or her organizational skill. Her empire was simultaneously a military machine, an economic powerhouse, a social system, and a psychological experiment, all engineered by a leader who understood the deepest truths of human behavior and control. Her story transcends piracy. It is a masterclass in leadership, strategy, and power, a blueprint for anyone seeking to understand how authority is built, maintained, and sustained across time. She remains unmatched, not through legend or violence alone, but through precision, vision, and unshakable authority, a historical figure whose influence endures centuries later.